I have a little bit of brain fog. So I'm used to writing my notes and speaking from written text. And the fact that I don't have them made me feel very insecure. But then I just said to myself, Raquel, just speak with them and talk about everything that happened. Yeah. This is not theory, you have to live through this. Okay? So just have a conversation with them. And so I'm sorry that I'm not stood out. But I wanted to speak with you about my experience as an early career researcher and a PhD candidate now at the University of Bristol. I think that I just, at the plenary, as I was coming out, someone said to me two things that really stayed in my mind. The first thing that he said was, congratulations. And then I just thought, come on, man, you know what I was. and then I just started thinking, why is he congratulating me? Or what is he congratulating me for? And I think that this person who is an academic, he was congratulating me for the fact that I stayed in academia. And he was congratulating me for the fact that I am going to finish my PhD, which I think is it's going to become some sort of feed, and then the other thing that he said is well, so when's the viva? And that's the worst thing that you can say to a PhD student, because right now I'm encountering a little bit of an excellent academic problem, which is that I have to turn in my thesis in 2 months, and I've had severe brain fog for the past 6 weeks, so I have not been able to write a single sentence. And I thought to myself, Raquel, this is such a great problem to have. It's not about transactivism, it's not about gender, it's not about people trying to cancel you or your work, trying to get your immigration status into trouble, any of that. It's just this person needs to think, and she has trouble thinking right now. But it got me thinking about what's the takeaway from my experience in academia, and I think that I absolutely respect the women who have gone through similar issues like intimidation and bullying in academia and have decided that, this is not a space for me, I'm going to find a space that is more welcoming. But I think that there's something within my experience that tells me that, the real value and power of my experience is that I have stayed within my censor and I have not left because I just keep insisting that I have not done anything wrong. Some of you may know about this, but my experience is it feels now like a quiet cancellation, because it started in 2018, January 2018. This was the prehistoric era. So it was in a time in which there weren't that many women speaking out. Things were it was like a taboo topic, and the bullying campaign started because I decided to share a meeting for Women's Place UK. At that point, I wasn't even speaking about the issue, I was just sharing the meeting. And then what I noticed now, with the benefit of hindsight, is that it carried on for years after, because the university's policies and procedures condition that in order for them to make an investigation, you had to keep quiet. The person who was complaining had to sort of be confidential about it. So what would happen to me is that every time I would just be, I became like a rare bird, because it was they just couldn't understand why I just kept talking. They just couldn't understand why I was oh, this woman is facing all of this pressure, but instead of just keeping her head down and focusing on her work, she's doing another event and then another event. I was yes, I will do more. So it became a quiet cancellation in which every time I would do an event about sex and gender identity issues, trans activists on campus would start some sort of campaign of vilification. And because I had filed a complaint within the University of Bristol, and it was a confidential procedure, I couldn't say, I am being bullied, I am being harassed, students are targeting me. And that carried on for a number of years. And I think that looking back, what was most traumatizing for me was that factor. And I'm so proud of women around the UK who, the second that they are targeted, they go on social media and they say what is happening. They say, this is happening to me, this happened to me in a class, and they receive a massive upswell of support. because that was something that I didn't have that for a very long time. So it felt a little bit like I was this, aside from a rare bird, I was this very naive person who was trusting the institution, who was trusting the policies, because I thought within my mind, the policies exist to protect everyone. These people are clearly insane. I am not insane. Therefore, the institution is going to see that it is only right that they ensure that I have a right to study and work in an environment that is not hostile and that is welcoming. And I think that something that was pivotal in my case is that for the period of time, 2 years, whatever long, that I was silent and I was not speaking publicly about what was happening, they could just sort of rationalize in their own heads. So the trans activists can get us into the media and create a big fuss. This one is meek, therefore she's not going to get us into any trouble. So they just completely disregarded my rights as a student. You know? And I can pinpoint exactly the moment that things begin to change for me in academia, and it was the second that I spoke with a young man called Ewan Somerville, who was a journalist in the Sunday Times. Because the second that this became a media issue, a media story, then the university senior management and the people who do the PR stuff, they realized, well, actually, we have to pay closer attention to this. And something that became very evident when we eventually went to trial is that the things that they were, that they considered acceptable to be said to me when I was quiet and I couldn't stand up for myself, they denounced them in court. In court, they would say, no, we obviously do not support the abuse of women. You know, obviously we don't want to be associated with it. But then when it was happening internally to their students, to a woman who defends sex-based rights, then they had no trouble just pretending that nothing was happening. The outcome of that complaint process is that they said that they saw no bullying, no harassment, everything's fine, what are you talking about? And this was after 2 years of saying, yes, of course, this is wrong, this shouldn't happen. So they denied it everything in the end, and that's when I made the decision, a decision that changed my life, to say, you know what, this is just not acceptable. You cannot have two different types of students, those who matter and those who don't. And that's when I decided to go to court. And then when we were in court, then they said, oh, of course, well, there is bullying, but it's not our fault. You know, there is bullying, but it's the students, it's not the institution. And in the end, you know, that's what happened. In the end, the court found that there was bullying and intimidation, but the university had no duty of care to me because it was enacted by the trans activist students and staff, not by the institution itself. That is the judgment. It is fine. I've made peace with it. And I knew that I had lost the legal case for about 3 weeks before the public knew. And I felt in my heart that I had all of this support from women. Like every day, the court was filled with women who were there to like support me and show solidarity. And I knew that I was going to disappoint all of these women when I lost my legal case. And I felt like I know a piece of information that is going to be not helpful to the movement, but I cannot say it yet. And then eventually the news came out and it felt like a sigh of relief. And for a while, you know, when it was just me in my head, not being able to talk to people about this, I thought that, you know, if you bring a high-profile legal case in the sex and gender identity arena and you lose, then you become some sort of like unmentionable. That I would go to like all of these public events and people would ask like, how's Raquel? And they would be like, oh, we don't talk about her anymore. We don't talk about Raquel anymore. I thought that that's what was going to happen, and then it didn't happen, you know? And that's not what happened. So I think that it's weird to think about where my life was a year ago. I went to court. The process started on the 7th of February. So it's bizarre to think about where my life was back then, because you feel like you are You feel like this, I felt like I compartmentalized, and this was this other person who was going through this experience, and then I could come back to myself. But I'm very grateful, you know, that every day there were women in the court who were there with me, and when things went well, it was good to have them there, and then when things went bad, it was good to have the support of women too. But I think back to like, well, why am I doing a PhD? And it's so interesting that I am doing a PhD. My PhD is on men who pay for sex. And the reason why I chose that topic is because I care about what happens to women in the sex trade, what happens to women in prostitution. And when you're in academia, what happens in the prostitution debate is that you are forced into these two extremes, whether women are forced into it and are being abused, or women definitely wanted it and they just love having sex with different men for money. You have to choose. And then the debate is endless. You make no progress. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be really smart, and I'm going to step out of that debate, and I'm just going to focus on the men. And that's going to be really easy. So I decided that's why I want to focus on sex buyers, because at the end of the day, whether it is women who are being coerced into this position, or whether it is a free choice, you know, at the end of the day, it is men saying, I want to pay for the redhead so that she does X, Y, and Z with me. So that's the topic that I chose. And then something that really stands out to me is that all of these women, you know, we have our own subject area that we care very much about, you know. We care about women in prison, women in prostitution, all of these other topics. But the purpose of transactivism and what they are doing, intimidating women in academia, is to deter us from actually addressing the patriarchy, which is such a great job from the patriarchy, you know? So I think that, you know, the fact that we are here together, 900 of us, is a testament to the women who sometimes choose other institutions, women who stay within their institutions and fight, and the women who decide to put these things together, because that is how we are actually addressing the patriarchy that is underlying what happens to all of us. Thank you.